Welcome to another edition of Time for Forgiveness, the show that not only teaches you how to forgive, but also gives you compelling guests who share their stories on how they found the path to forgiveness. Now, please welcome your hosts. Here are Kelly and Bob Pascuzzi. Welcome to another powerful episode of Time for Forgiveness, where we help you in the art of forgiveness. Joining us today is our special guest. This is Jen Greenstreet, who is the CEO of Just Like You Films. Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi, our incredible hosts, are with us. And Kelly, why don't you start by introducing our very special guest?
Well, I'm excited to introduce you, Jen. And if I would read your bio, I think it would take most of the show. So what caught my attention is you started your professional career as a prosecuting attorney. And you litigated 520 felony cases. And then you represented the state in 46 jury trials. And so what I thought about is your job was as an advocate, but you had to find the worst in someone. And I would guess that you also brought that into your own life, and that was your new lens that you would see the city through, that you lived in. Mm-hmm. What I was so inspired by is you just felt a need that you really needed to make a change, but you did that without knowing what was next. But it really opened the door and led you to your purpose of still telling stories, but finding the best of people. Mm-hmm. And I cannot wait for you to tell your story, to let our audience see it through your lens.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible intro. That was
wonderful.
Thank you. And I think we're done. No.
And scene. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. You know, when you talked about me trying 45 jury trials, wow, that took me back to, I was very young in the office. I went through college and law school very quickly. I did the 3-3 program, but I had a year of college finished when I started as an 18-year-old. So I turned 21 my first year of law school.
Wow. Very impressive.
And then I started interning in the prosecutor's office. And I actually decided to go to law school because I had an internship out of high school in the prosecutor's office. And I was working and it was the person that helped me get the internship said, you can either work in the public defender's office or the prosecutor's office. Which one would you prefer? And I actually initially chose the public defender's office, which how different would I wonder, I just love looking back on anyone's life but my life and like the forks in the road. And if I'd gone down that path, how would my life be different? Mm-hmm. And the prosecutor's office didn't have a position, or the public defender's office did not have a position for me. So I ended up as a file clerk, an 18-year-old file clerk in the prosecuting attorney's office. And what an experience that was. Like, I did stay in my little file area, and that's back in the day when we had physical files. So I had to, literally put the files back in, and the prosecutors would always come in a big rush. I need this file, I need that file, and we'd have to pull them out real quick. But they gave me permission to go down in the courtroom and observe the trials or the hearings. So every chance I got, I went down just to observe. Like, is this what I want to do? What is this all about? And I remember watching Pat Peters, who has since passed away, but such an eloquent speaker and dynamic personality. And it was like a show. And I was acting at the time. I loved being in plays and acting. But I'm like, this is similar. This is kind of like a show. I didn't draw that connection until much later in life, but I knew I was drawn to it. And I saw him standing up there and arguing for justice. Like, he used the word justice and the law and on behalf of someone who had been victimized, and I'm just like, this is it, man. This is what I have. The skill. I can tell stories. I can analyze facts and evidence and synthesize them down into small points. And I want to do it for this reason. And I had I had an incident very young in life when someone broke in our house and broke into my room. So I know there was some part of that was wanting to help others that had that happen to them.
Sure.
But yeah, that was such an incredible experience. And then to be actually at 25 years old, I tried my first murder case.
25.
Wow.
Actually, I think it was 24, actually.
Were you the youngest prosecuting attorney?
Yes.
Ever?
Oh, by far. Maybe ever.
Right.
And I just still cannot believe they gave me that responsibility. Looking back, I was with a very experienced, seasoned lawyer, and I was sitting second chair, and he was very involved in what I was doing, and I ran everything past him. But he gave me the second half of closing argument, and it was a homicide, a murder case. It was a murder too, and he had used a Tech-9, which is like a semi-automatic weapon. And if you've ever seen a Tech-9, it's a really mean-looking gun. And the issue was between whether it was intentional or accidental or like a rage. It was between a voluntary manslaughter and murder 2, or murder 2 and murder 1. That was the intent was at issue. And so I was arguing that the gun, he went to go get that gun. He chose that gun. And that, what does this gun say to you? And I was waving this gun around in front of the jury. If you chose this gun and went back into that room with this gun, what do you think your intent is? This gun says, I'm going to end this life, you know?
Yeah.
And then also in the state of Missouri, you can develop intent in a matter of seconds, like 1 second is intent. Like other states, you have to show planning and over time. But in the state of Missouri, you can develop an intent to kill in a second. So my other argument is he held down the trigger for many seconds, you know, in the and he kept pressing. Every time you press that trigger, that's developing the intent to end someone's life. And so I'm doing this at 24 years old. I was very proud of myself that I was able to stand up there and, you know, because you're in your 20s and you're like just doing the best you can. And so we're sitting at the table and they read the verdict. And they sentenced him to murder 2. I think it was like 25 years or something. And I'm like, okay, we did it. Like, we achieved justice. I was feeling good. And then the wailing started. It's going to make me cry. He just started wailing. And his family, just the guttural cries. And to be in the presence of that, like the consequences of my actions and proving that case were so real and so present in that moment. And it just kind of came down on me like, oh, this is the job.
Wow.
You know?
Cause effect.
Exactly. And then it's not just this tragic incident where someone dies in a very violent way, but it's also the end of another life. Like in that moment was the end of this man's life. And he was very young. I think he was in his 20s. He was in the military. I mean, very well behaved through the whole trial, just the perfect gentleman. He had a strong family all around him. And I always, you know, I just looked at him like, oh, he's evil. There's something evil in him that we need to protect our community from. But then in that moment, I'm like, he's human. And there's something broken. And what do we do with that? And I just felt kind of hopeless in that moment. You know, like I thought this was the answer, but is it? You know, what is the answer?
What's amazing to me, Jen, is we're sitting here a few years later. We're not 24, but you're describing that trial like it happened 2 days ago.
Yeah. And
that's the kind of passion that I feel and the compassion that I feel coming from you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I feel like that was, when I left the prosecuting attorney's office, I had to go into counseling because I feel like I had trauma every time because you have to take on those
You're
facts.
absorbing all of that
Yeah.
energy too, right? The emotions.
Right.
And how many years was that?
Well, I started when I was 18 interning, but I was actually actively prosecuting for about a decade. So 9 or 10 years.
And I remember the story that when I first met you, you told me the story, and I was telling Bob and Kelly that when we first got a chance to talk, and we were doing an amazing charity event for Just Like You Films together, how you were with your husband and prosecuting, driving through the city, had taken over your life in such a way that everywhere you looked, you were prosecuting a murder from that street over there, and that building over there reminded you of this case you had, and you would talk to your husband about it, and you had 2 girls sitting in the back seat. And I'm going to cry right now because the way you said that as a mom, your daughter was leaning forward without you even realizing. It was just coming off, the cuff, talking to your husband normally. this consumed your life. And all of a sudden you saw your daughter intently listening and that this started to affect them. And your husband's like, you know what? They're listening. And that's when you told me you decided to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. I just felt such a heavy responsibility because I wanted so desperately to be an instrument of justice, that I really threw myself into my cases. And I think if you're going to do it in the right way, if you're going to advocate in the right, you almost have to. And so I got to the point where I just couldn't leave it at work. And plus, my husband's a lawyer also, and he's so smart and just such a wonderful, beautiful mind. And he would always collaborate with me on my cases. And so I was just, I had an issue with ballistics on a murder 2 case that happened in that neighborhood. And I was describing the scene, like how we found it. There was like a body in the living room, and there was one in the bedroom, but the trajectory didn't match one of the witnesses' testimonies. And how can I make this match, and how do I prove this case, and what really happened? Because that's the problem in all these cases, because it's such like you said, the worst in people. You take the very worst moment in their lives, and the emotion that's flowing, and the tragedy around that. Like, how do you parse that out and make it clinical and the evidence clear in a way that a jury can consume it and understand it and decide what is a just result here? So, yeah, I would think about it all the time. And when the minivan on that night, he pointed that out to me, that Whitney was listening. She's a lawyer now, cut too.
Wow. Mom.
Yeah, I know. Doesn't practice criminal law, but she is a litigator. So, so, and thank God that he pointed that out to me, because I do think that it had become all-consuming. And the way he phrased it to me is like, I think you're starting to see your city through this filter of crime. Is that the way that you want to see your city?
And Jen, I can see the internal conflict, because at a conscious level, you're doing your job. You've been trained to do this. This is what, you're acting in good faith in terms of what the law says, and this is your ultimate outcome, is to prove your case. But then maybe at a subconscious level in your heart, then and you see the finality of it and the consequence of it and how it affects people's lives, and then that's really creating that conflict internally. I can see how, and you mentioned that one act doesn't represent that individual's entire life, and we pointed that out, with Danny in the ravine, the story of the ravine, how the Danny that we knew, that one act, as horrible as it did not really represent his life, who he really was as a person. And so that does, I know that's had to be really challenging for you, because that's ongoing, day in, day out. And the weight of that.
But I think it also, I think it's easy for all of us, as our society is, to look for the bad. It's easy to find what's wrong. It's easy to find the negative, but then you actually train yourself to do that, and then that becomes the habit. Instead of looking for the good, you're trained job-wise, but also in your own environment, that you're always looking for what's wrong. So that's a whole nother layer of it, I would think, just as a person to take that on. And then you bring that in your environment as well.
So, Jen, when did you feel like you was there a defining moment? You mentioned 9 to 10 years that you were in this position, but was there just a tipping point one day or something, a trigger, or how did that all kind of transpire?
I think that when my husband said that, it started a conversation internally in my head, like to ask myself, is this the way I want to see my city? And then I love experimenting and exploring and investigating, and I think the only thing that I know for sure is that I don't know for sure, and that I'm always learning. And I tell my kids this, I will be learning until I die, please, God, because that brings me so much joy to learn and explore and experiment. So I started playing around with that idea, like, how do I want to see my city? What is my purpose? And just kind of putting that question out there to my friends, to my family. I think at that point I was in therapy because I went through a divorce that was really hard. And as part of that, I started doing therapy, and it was a lifesaver. So I just started putting that question out there, and I started looking around me, the lifers in the office. There was definitely some people that were doing it in a healthy way, managing that profession in a healthy way and thriving. But I could also see around me the weight of it taking a toll on people, and my friends, helped me see that too. And I don't know that I could have continued on and not had that impact me in that way and take that kind of a toll. So I think it was more that first question kind of kicked off a gradual exploration of where I wanted to be. And then my friends and family kind of gave me the courage to make that switch. And then I did go into private practice for a little while, and that didn't end up being the answer for me either. As a mother, that's just that's another conversation. As a woman, like with balancing the role of professional and mother.
Sure.
The job that I took on required me to travel a lot. And I was taking a deposition, had a really tough day, very adversarial deposition. And I was in my hotel room. It was raining. I was in like a big city that was in not a great part, and looking out the window, and my daughter was crying to me because she had a fever. She was little. And my husband got on the phone. I'm like, I just want to come home. I want to be with my baby, And he's like, why don't you just come home? And I'm like, I don't know if I can just, leave all of this. Like, this is who I am. This is my identity. Jen the lawyer,
Right.
Who am I without this? And I just jumped off the cliff. And I think
That's such a big question.
Right.
I mean, what you just said, who am I without this?
Yeah.
I think so many people can go to that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but, I mean,
no.
that's a big idea to go, who am I without this? And look who you've become without that. Yeah. Sometimes we think that we're giving something up, but we find that, we had to let go of that to open the space for what we really were meant to do.
And look at the path you're on now, changing people's lives by showcasing these incredible documentaries that you've been doing. And you're the head of Just Like You Films. And your passion is so incredible and so obvious. The first time I met you, your light shines bright behind the camera, I guess we can say. But also, your compassion for other people and wanting to tell their story is kind of what the prosecuting part, the attorney part led you into this incredible path and this journey that you're on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you say I'm like the head of Just Like You Films, I think Just Like You Films is the head of me.
I love that.
That's cool.
Because it's like I am just happy to be a part of it and happy to be like I had this moment and I always wanted to try surfing. I love you. I'm an athletic person. Like I feel like I'm probably hyperactive if I'm undiagnosed, and I get a lot of it out by playing games. Like my husband and I play ping pong probably 4 times a week.
Wow.
We have huge battles in the ping pong table.
Okay, so who wins?
I mean, it goes back and forth.
You let him win a couple times.
Yeah, I let him win. He's great. He's got longer arms. It's just like
Oh,
biological.
yeah, sure.
But yeah, I went and took a surfing lesson, and I was trying so hard to surf perfectly. Like I had studied it. Like I approach everything else. Like I'd studied like what I'm supposed to do, and then the instructor. I'm like listening so intensely and practicing, and we're out there in the waves, and I keep like swimming really hard, and I get up, and I just keep getting crushed, like falling over and over. Like 15 times of getting just rolled. And I'm like, I asked my instructor, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I feel like I'm doing everything that you're saying, like, exactly perfectly. And he's like, that's exactly what you're doing wrong. You're trying to surf perfectly. And he's like, each wave is different. And the job of a surfer is to mold your body to the wave underneath your feet in that moment.
Wow. Welcome to Surfing 101. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
Welcome to life.
I know, it's like,
101.
blew my mind. I'm like, oh
Metaphor
my God.
of that transcends like everything. That we do.
Everything.
That's exactly what I
Everything.
was thinking when you said that. I'm like, mold yourself to each wave is different. Every path is different.
Yeah.
Each
Yeah.
day is different.
Each day, yeah.
Each moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I was like, oh, I'm going to make this plan. I'm going to execute the plan, and everything's going to be great, And like with my law school thing. Like, I'm going to do it. I grew up without a lot of money. I was rich in family, not rich in money or things. And so I wanted to make these plans and execute. And it worked for me so far, but it hadn't worked in a lot of ways, you know? So I did get up and surf a wave. And that was kind of affirmation of that concept. And so when Just Like You Films came along, it was like a wave coming up underneath my feet. And there were many moments where I could have said, no, I'm surfing this perfectly. This is my path, and I'm doing this perfectly. Mm-hmm. But I allowed myself that moment to feel the wave and move with it.
Wow.
Rather than try to plow through with my plan. And my therapist had said, I grew up, in church and religion, and I'm not a super religious person. I'm very spiritual. And my therapist has said, Jen, it's thy will be done. You think it's my will be done, but it's actually thy will be done, which I think is also like in line with that wave metaphor. Mm-hmm. And so I have waves all over my house as a reminder.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and my husband is so good, just ride the wave, Jen. Whenever I start executing my plan.
Well, and it goes back to being spiritual and God's plan. You think you have a plan, and he just laughs and goes, "Hold on, go ahead, do your thing. Keep trying to ride that wave, Jen. And then I will show you."
Yeah. And sometimes the waves are like you just stand there. They're so calm.
Yeah.
And beautiful. But then it's like sometimes they throw the storms at you, and then you really just got to bend your knees and breathe, man.
And
Hold
when
on
you get
for
in that
dear
washing
life.
machine, you need to take a minute and understand what's happening at that moment. Talking to a surfer, grew up in Southern California.
No, that's right.
You're talking my language, girl.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, you'll have to give me a lesson sometime. I'll go out there with you.
But Bob and Kelly, I think you'll agree that the way you tell a story, from the minute we sat down to the way you mold everything together, is why you're so good at telling other people's stories in documentaries, in these incredible journeys that you've helped us go along with the films that you've created. You have your passion and your path. You're where you belong. And everything that you've done to this point to get you there. And I love that you said, Just Like Filmed is you. You're not the head of them. It's the head of you. And you live that. And you've proven that.
Yeah. And it's always the projects, like Kelly, when you came to me about the grief project. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that sounds so hard. That sounds hard. And am I ready for that? I don't know. And it felt like going maybe to the prosecutor's office, because you're talking about really tragic moments and sad moments. And then I had just lost my brother-in-law. We had that lunch, and I was grieving. And I'm like, what is it about being with you guys that makes me cry? And I didn't even really know on a conscious level how much that had impacted me, and I shared that with you. And right before we left, we were getting out of the booth, and you said, Jen, will you just take a moment and tell me 3 things that you love about Steve? And my heart just leapt, and I'm like, wow, I'm so excited and so happy and so joyful in this moment to celebrate my dear brother-in-law who loved me and supported Just Like You Films. He was on my board of directors. And you gave me that space to really honor him. And I'm like, this is not painful. I'm so grateful for this moment. And if I can create something that would be a vehicle for someone else to feel what I'm feeling right now in this moment, then I'm in, man.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's the moment where I'm like, okay, I want to do this with Kelly. But it's like if I had to slow myself down and be in that moment with you, because, our schedules and we were moving along and
it's so important how you said that. You had to slow the moment down, but then you had to feel. It's easy to slow the moment down, but then we're like, well, I'm not going to feel that. But what I think was really cool is, like you said, grief in the beginning, it's hard. But then through your story, there was beauty that surfaced as well.
Yeah.
So I love that you bring both aspects, but you really focus on what's good and the bravery and just the hope and getting to the other side. And, the tools to help bring awareness and educate others, which is really cool.
Yeah, and you bring the tool. Like the people that I work with in these films, that's what I want to highlight. Because I would never have thought to ask someone, tell me 3 things that you loved about your dear one that's passed. That's a tool. That's an important tool that people, I think, could really benefit from, and it can change people's lives. So I'm excited to do that with you.
I love it. And I love the subjects that you've also taught with your films. You know, you did one for food allergies. Growing up as a kid with food allergies, I had people looked at me different and really didn't know how to react. You know, and I always felt different and kind of, I'll be honest, sometimes a little strange because I had a food allergy. And people would just be like, he's kind of weird because he has a food allergy. But your education, the way that you have taught people through your films, and tell us a little bit more about some of the films that you've done and some of the subjects that you've dealt with.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for 17 years.
Wow.
And I'm either have produced and distributed or in pre-production on 16 movies. And I've been fortunate to talk about that part of me that's so curious and always wants to learn. I've been so fortunate to learn so much and about so many different topics. Our first film was about severe burn injuries. And then we did cancer, then on to Down syndrome, facial anomalies, which includes like cleft lip and palate, facial paralysis, lymphangioma, port wine stain, birthmarks is included in that. Then we did type 1 diabetes and anxiety disorder and depression, which was a big one. And then we moved on to food allergies, and we're getting ready to start shooting cerebral palsy in a month.
Wow.
And then now grief. So, and then we also did an anti-bullying pledge, which another part about surrendering and, you know, kind of letting Just Like You films run me is like that anti-bullying pledge came to me kind of as a I feel like my creative moments are like more like downloads, and it came to me whole. I was working out. I was in a spin class. My dear, I'll give her a plug. Mojo is
Nice.
She's like a spin class, and I love it. And it's like I can just kind of lose myself in the music, and it's very dark, and I kind of get into a little meditative state. But my board had been saying we need something for anti-bullying because that's essentially what you're doing with these films is helping prevent bullying. And so I was kind of had my mind on it, and this pledge came to me as like a download, and I left the classroom. Because it's one of my best friends. I knew she wouldn't care. So I left, and I went on at the desk and wrote it down in, like, full. And so I know that's not me. Like, I know I'm just, like, a live wire that is coming through.
That was this energy moving to and through and giving you the words. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And if you're just open enough to receive it and then to take that next step. Because I feel like I get downloads all the time. But, like, okay, you got to stop and write it down, Jenny. And I always think, I'll remember it. You got to capture it in the moment. Yeah, you do.
Yes.
It's like catching a wave.
I like that downloads all the time because we do. And when we're driving, sometimes when in the middle of the night, you know, and the greatest, Alan Jackson is a country music superstar who wrote one of the greatest songs of all time after 9/11 because he woke up in the middle of the night and it was just a download, and he wrote it down right then. And when he woke up, he didn't remember all that he wrote. And when he read it, he looked at it and thought, I have to record this right now, because he was so blown away by what he had written. And that's what I love when you say download. A lot of people don't understand that these happen to everybody every day. You just have to recognize it and write it down. I love that.
Yeah, it's the truth. And what a gift, that song, and how cathartic that probably was for so many people.
Yeah.
I just do think that it's like I know I listened to your very first podcast, and like when you talked about like other realms and like the spiritual world and angels among us, and I feel like that's an example. Like they're giving us, hey, here's a little something to help you guys.
Yeah.
Like I can see you need help.
Yeah, Bob Proctor, who was a great friend and a mentor to Kelly and I, he always said the answers to everything are here. They're already here. We just have to ask for them, and then be an open, as you said, to receive them, and recognizing those. Right. So I think sometimes we doubt things, and it's easy to reject when those things come through, because maybe we're fearful or we don't know if that's the right thing, and we question. And so what you're telling the audience, Jen, is that be open and receive it, and be confident that those are messages that you're supposed to take and do something with.
I'm a huge Bob Proctor fan. I can't believe you know him personally. That's very exciting.
We're actually interviewing Linda Proctor, his wife.
Oh my gosh.
This morning. She's going to be on the show.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll for sure listen to that one.
Yeah.
And I have the same thing. Like, I get nervous and fear of being judged and putting something out there into the universe. And my little ego is like, but what if, somebody doesn't like it or judges you about it? So I think it takes a lot of courage to let those things come through. And I think because I was very early on in my life dealing in life or death situations, and kind of, and then I also had, somebody broke into my house, and then I had an accident that was kind of a near-death experience for me. And I think just kind of being on the cusp of, the two worlds maybe helped me be braver about letting those things come through and putting them out in the world. And then I also did the Artist Way. Have you guys heard of the Artist Way? It's such a great program. And it says basically that we are receiving downloads, and that my job is to only allow that download to come out, write it down, push it out. But then what happens to it after that, whether people judge it or use it or find help from it, that's none of my business.
Right.
My business is this. And then putting it out there, and then let the world receive it how they want to receive it, because that's their business. And that gives me some freedom and helps me be more courageous. And
it takes courage to tell your story. I was afraid to tell our story for quite some time, of being judged, people thinking, why would you want to tell that? So I quieted my voice for quite some time. But when you said something that's so, I think, powerful to think through, is those downloads. Anytime I go to fear, I know that that's not the download. That's in my own head, and it's just my own limiting beliefs or ideas or fears. And it does take courage just to put it out there and let it go. But it is beautiful when you do it.
Yeah. And that's a discipline, pushing that fear away. That's hard to do.
I just want to know when the book is going to come out, Jen, because you've got quite an array of stories. Your path and your journey is truly inspirational. How can people find out more about Just Like You Films?
You can go to our website, www.justlikeyoufilms.org. And also our Anxiety and Depression film is streaming on, I think, 25 different platforms. So iTunes, Amazon Prime. You can find that's a feature-length film that we did. And, that's probably the best way.
I love it. I love that you've been with us today, because we've been so inspired. We learned so much about downloads. Number one, don't ignore downloads. I will never ignore a download ever again. But also about your passion and finding your path. And I think that's what's most important.
Yeah.
And before we end, I was hoping, you've already cried a couple times, so one more time's not going to hurt. But you said a really powerful word, is next steps. And there are steps in forgiveness. And that's what we're talking about as well. And you had mentioned how a situation had changed your perception from judging to compassion. Would you be willing to share that?
Oh, yeah. When the one we shared in the studio.
Yeah, because you said it kind of opened yourself up to the idea of forgiveness, from moving from judgment to compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were so many moments as a prosecuting attorney where that message was coming through loud and clear. And I think that's probably a documentary that and I know I've seen other documentaries about the criminal justice system and how to handle crime and the human being that commits the crime. But I think in the prosecutor's office, we had this mindset of we are achieving justice, we're protecting the community, we're going to do our job. And part of that is judging. That was literally our job, to judge people and determine what's the best charge here, what's the best sentence here. And I, through that process, had the mindset of looking at them as not individuals, but like, okay, a case. And I had worked early on as an intern on a death penalty case. And I'd done some research and very outside the case. I was young and not a lead prosecutor. Plus, that's another conversation, the death penalty. I don't really believe that that's a good resolution. But I went to the sentencing hearing, and I had a picture in my head of this person as evil and as someone that maybe, like, even though I don't believe in the death penalty, needs to be removed from community permanently because his crime was so atrocious and so horribly violent. But then in the sentencing hearing, they allowed defendants to bring in their friends and family and testify on their behalf and talk about the rest of their life, not just that moment. Mm-hmm. And a social worker came in, and this particular individual, as a child, had been, and I don't know, I can't remember specifically the facts, but what really stuck out to me was that for a long period of time, maybe like a year or longer, was kept chained in a doghouse outside and literally treated like a dog.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I thought about how I'd been thinking of that individual up to that point. And then having that new information just really opened my eyes to, of course, like if you treat someone like an animal, then they're probably going to behave like an animal at some point in their lives. If that's their perception of themselves and they have that horrible trauma. And just opened my mind up to, I need to see big picture, a person as a whole, rather than the one incident and then just go for, retribution. I don't think that's the answer. So that was one moment in my life that's like, okay, forgiveness is key. Yeah.
You're so strong. You're holding back so much right now. And I just love everything about, your heart. And from the inside out, you are a light, and I just love to watch you shine.
Sean, likewise, my friend. So grateful for you and that you came into my life, and the Pascuzzi's for introducing us. And it's just a lot of wonderful things around this table right now. And to you guys for having this podcast and having the courage to provide a platform for people to share stories.
Well, we're very inspired by what you're doing, obviously, Jen, and that you decided to dedicate your life. Your mission is to influence people in a positive way, and you're doing that. So, just bravo. Keep going.
Well,
keep going.
You.
That's what we hope to do here with Time for Forgiveness. We're starting a new mission, and we just loaded up a workbook that we're very excited about that will help people navigate their pathway through forgiveness if they're having a challenge with that. And then we're asking them to scan a QR code on it. The last page is a declaration page where they state that they're forgiving something or somebody, and then going to our website and posting that on a forgiveness wall. And so we're starting this movement of forgiveness is the way we look at it. But you inspired us to do that, and so many other great people are out there that are starting movements that are really influencing and impacting people in a positive way. So thank you for that inspiration.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. I'm going to have to check that out.
Sometimes it's not about forgiving others. Sometimes you even have to forgive yourself.
Yes.
And you've showed us a lot today. We certainly appreciate having you as our special guest. This is Jen Greenstreet, the CEO of Just Like You Films. Jen, you are open to come back anytime and share some more of your incredible stories and talk more about the amazing documentaries that you're putting together and the educational films that we have all learned so much from.
Well, thank you. I'm in.
Wow, what an exciting episode. Thank you so much for listening and for watching Time for Forgiveness. Hey, listen, visit our website at timeforforgiveness.org. And here's the great news. You can now download our workbook. Just click on the QR code. It's that simple. You can also message us on our website because we read every single message, and we certainly love to help. You can also reach us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us, again, at info@timeforforgiveness.org. I'm Sean Parr for Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.